Now I will show you what has to be done underneath the Student tab. So I will go and I will select Student. The COSIF is within the Student tab. The COSIF is called the Early On Assessment. There's a birth to 2, and when the child exits early on, there's an early childhood assessment 3 to 5. So I will show you how to do an assessment right now. So I will select Add Entrance or Add Exit. As you can see, my previously done ones are currently up here, so I can view them at any time. If a child is school eligible, an entrance will already be done, and you can view that by selecting View. So we will go to Add Exit Assessment. So my site is selected. I will select my data source, which would be the Battelle. I'll select my assessment date, which will be today. The date of parent input, this could be done through the meeting. It could be done on a separate occasion, so you would select that, how you receive that parent input, and the date. I will then select my rating based off of that decision tree. So for this child, for social relationships, I have Emerging. For acquiring and using knowledge and skills, I have Emerging. And for taking appropriate action to meet their needs, I have Between Not Yet and Emerging. Now, even though these scores might be still significantly delayed, I still will say yes, the child has shown improvements. And the reason why that is because as a child ages, their skills become more intensive. And so even if they're showing any type of growth, we still have to make sure we check those yes buttons. So then I will select yes or save. And you can see that then it has shown up right here. So I can go back and view it at any point. Now, if a child suddenly leaves your district and you are unable to get a hold of them and you cannot complete a COSIF, you will go to IFSP Student Contact Log. I've done this previously, so I'll scroll down here and you'll see it says unable to contact, and the reason is exit due to unusual circumstances. So I would write unable to contact up here, the date. Let me write that for you so you can see. We're going to use today's date, and the reason why we have to choose the type, which is all the way at the bottom. Unusual exit, exit due to unusual circumstances. Once I save that log, I go back to the COSIF and I will see my new log date entered under here as to why that exit is not done. It says exit due to unusual circumstances. So that is my documentation. I would then recommend to print this page and put this in the file so you have it for the student. There are 2 other areas underneath the Student tab that you will need to be familiar with. If a child is exiting early on for any reason, you will select the Early On tab. You will push Edit Early On, and you will have to complete the last 2, the Early On Exit Reason and the Early On Exit Date. The Early On Exit Reasons are listed here. Now, for a child who is exiting early on and going into the ECSE classroom before they are 3, it has to be completion of IFSP. The reason why that is because right now the state does not look at children exiting early on until age 3. So at this time, they do not have an accurate way to code this. So we have to use completion of IFSP. You enter in the date, and then you select Save. And your information will be saved here. The last selection that I'm going to take you to is when you have to complete an early on transition. So you will select Early On Transition. Again, I select Early On Transition Edit. Now previously, these were automatically defaulting to untimely. So if a transition is timely, we need to make sure that these still say timely. If it was late, we need to make sure that it was hopefully an acceptable reason. So then we would select acceptable. The first 2 are going to be yes. If a child is receiving special ed services or has been evaluated, there has been notification to the state and to the local agency. So I would select yes and yes, and then for my transition, I would make sure it says timely or acceptable. If the transition is late and marked as acceptable, you need to make sure that that information is properly within the contact log. And then I select save, and then the information has been saved. This is the end of your student contacts.